Okay, we have Councilmember Budge,
Yes, here.
Councilmember Terry,
Here.
Councilmember McGarvey, Councilmember McGarvey. I will say at this moment in time, he is absent until we can hear him. Vice Mayor Gatewood, Councilmember
Garrett,
McGarvey.
you're on mute.
Councilmember McGarvey, did we hear you? Vice Mayor Gatewood? I'll take that as an absent at this moment in time. And Mayor Sander?
Here.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
We've got you. That will work. If you can hear us, we can hear you.
Excellent.
Just calling the roll, so I think you're now marked present.
Yes. What about Vice Mayor Gatewood?
Okay. You can hear you, Bob? Yeah, okay.
All right, Stacy, could you do the Metro Cable TV television announcement?
You're on my cell phone. Okay.
Yes, I can do the announcement. The meeting of the Rancho Cordova City Council will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will air Thursday, June 4th at 9 a.m. and Sunday, June 7th at 6 p.m. A DVD copy is available for checkout from any library branch. A copy can also be ordered from the city clerk's department, and a webcast of this meeting will also be available on the city's website within 48 hours of adjournment of this meeting.
Very good. Thank you for that. I've been on a lot of meetings where we have done pledges of allegiance over Zoom. It is somewhat chaotic, but I think we will make the attempt. I'm going to ask Adam if you can unmute yourself, place your hand over your heart, and lead us in the pledge.
Thank you for the honor, Mayor. I pledge allegiance
To the
flag of the United States
and to the republic
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation.
indivisible, liberty and justice for all. That comes across a little bit like a Rotary meeting happy birthday. But nonetheless, it is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Got it.
Thank you all. This is the point in the agenda where we would normally do the invocation. Tonight, I'm going to call on us to just have a moment of silence in lieu of a invocation. We did have agendized tonight for our meeting a proclamation that would declare today, June 1st, 2020, as a National Day of Prayer and Lament to grieve and honor those who have fallen victim to coronavirus. That was organized nationally by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I signed up the City of Rancho Cordova to participate in proclaiming today that National Day of Prayer and Lament. So if you would join me, please, in a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much. We had a presentation scheduled for tonight, item 5.1, which we are going to postpone. I'd like to be able to thank Marilyn Phelps for her service in person, as opposed to remotely. So, with her concurrence and Cyrus's concurrence, we will postpone that. Madam Clerk, we have public comment listed next. So my understanding is we can't collect any live using this medium today, but we may have collected some in person or by another means.
That is correct. So we have 0 public comment that has come via email. We did have one individual drop off a public speaker card and has asked that I read the following. This is from Tara Kolvenbach. Tara has asked that I thank you for keeping us safe in extraordinary times. Rancho Cordova is the best place to be and to be safe. Those were her words.
Right. Very good. Well, we could hear that every meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, Tara. Without council objection, I'm going to forego council reports and move on to city manager's report. Anything you want to?
No, Mr.
report
Mayor,
on,
I would
Cyrus?
also ask that I would defer in the interest of time to the next meeting.
Okay, we're going to go on to consent calendar items. These are items 9.1 through 9.5. Consent calendar items consist of matters deemed routine and non-controversial by staff. Unless a member of the council wishes to pull an item for individual consideration, all items will be approved by one motion. Are there
Can
any
I
items
just confirm?
here?
I just have one question. You said 9.1. I'm looking on our website's agenda, but I just pulled up. It's 10.1. Do we have the right numbers for these?
I think that's consent public hearings.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, I wrote down. Yep, 9.1.
Consent calendar items.
Yes, if there is no objection, I'll move the calendar.
Okay. There was a motion and a second for 9.1 through 9.5. Did you get the individuals, Stacy?
I got Councilmember Terry, and was it Councilmember Budge?
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I heard.
Yes. So roll
All
call.
right, any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Budge,
Yes.
Councilmember Terry,
Aye.
Councilmember McGarvey,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gatewood,
Yes.
Mayor Sander.
Aye.
Thank you.
That takes us to consent public hearing items. These are items 10.1 through 10.7. Again, they're considered non-controversial by staff. We can vote on them all as a group unless someone wishes to call on a specific item.
David. David.
We'll open the public hearing. Yes, Linda.
Okay. I just have a couple of questions about 10.7.
10.7.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll
I'll move the balance of the calendar.
hold that to the side. So a motion's been made for 10.1 through 10.6,
Yeah, and I'll second it.
seconded by Budge. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Budge,
Yes.
Councilmember McGarvey,
Aye.
Councilmember Terry,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gatewood,
Yes.
Mayor Sander.
Aye. Okay, and item 10.7.
I don't need a staff report. Well, let me just ask a couple questions. Stacey, if you want to read it into the record.
Yes. White Rock Center Major Design Review, project number DD9940, located at the southwest corner of White Rock Road and Luong Drive.
Okay. So, there's, I'm going to say that our exhibits are adequate. Again, we got a picture of one building, and so that kind of begs the question whether the buildings are identical or whether they're mirror images. garages or what, and I'm not sure, we got landscape for the whole project either. But my overarching concern is, these buildings look okay. It's just that we need to be mindful of the fact that one of only two potential, or three potential, major access points to Rio de Oro. And so everyone who is going to live there or be a potential home buyer there is going to be driving the area. And because we have such a huge corridor, I mean, it's a supported corridor, we really want it to look the best it can look. And yes, this is industrial, but that doesn't mean that the buildings have to be plain or unattractive. And I'm not saying that that is completely, that they're completely unattractive or too plain or whatever. But if there were a way to kind of dress these up a little bit or just confirm that we've got attractive landscaping, I'm still a fan of the industrial office park that we had under the county. It was called MP Industrial Office Park, and it allowed for a huge range of industrial, scaled industrial designed buildings, but provided business and professional quality landscaping, so that the area would look, and quite frankly, the people who bought this two Rancho Cordova decades ago wanted their areas to be sure to look as attractive as they thought they did in the Bay Area, like Silicon Valley. So I want to encourage us to remember what importance White Rock Road has currently and is going to take in the future. If there's a way to work on this, I would be happy to move to continue it. If you all are comfortable with it, okay, let's go ahead and approve it. But with caution, to work on future projects more intently.
I think that's a good comment. As I looked at this plan, I think I saw a 25-foot landscaping area on White Rock and a 10-foot wrapping around the side on the Young. But what did occur to me is that the design of the parcel here is such that there's sort of one central driveway that feeds into two parking lots. And that feels very kind of with an industrial layout, almost like you would see in the auto recycling area or something like that. And so, Linda, along the lines of what you just said, I'm wondering if there's a more attractive way to do the entrance and exit from the parcel that maybe would eliminate that central connection and have one on each end or something like that. The Young is there, though, so that would be a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Curiously, David, I would say an advocate there and say that because of the potential traffic volume on White Rock, the potential traffic volume on White Rock, their driveways are the best. I think what we have up and down Sunrise, where the shared driveways were intentional to ensure that there's not too many driveways, too many points of entry into the traffic. Of course, now that's very auto-centric, not necessarily pedestrian friendly, but very auto, but it is designed for safety, and we don't know what kind of use there will be in these buildings. So, is there potential for large truck traffic, or is it small delivery traffic, or is it more private vehicles because of the people who will work there? I'm not sure we have that kind of information. I also had a technical question for Iris or Adam. They've got three parcels, and they're supposedly doing a lot line adjustment. Can they actually get rid of the parcel with a lot line adjustment? Is the MAP Act allow that?
I believe the answer is yes. You can triple check. It's usually used
Adam or Cyrus?
to realign, but I think you can reduce the number as well.
Okay, I just don't remember having approved that at subdivision review committee. Not using that particular vehicle. But that was minor. My concern is really, making sure that we take care of the, approach and departure, through and around Westboro and Laurel.
Yeah, the attractiveness of the corridor, I think, is a big deal.
We have a couple of buildings out there that are really quite, unique looking. Not talking about Costco at all. But the one that's, kind of dark gray and has those red, side entrances. I'm not sure that's Woodmac. I think it's the building west of Woodmac.
Okay, any other council comment on this? Otherwise, I would entertain, Councilwoman Budge's, interest in holding this item over for a little more discussion or work.
I have no objection to that.
Okay,
Okay, then I will move that we continue this week to, what's that, the 15th?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
okay. Let's see, I'll leave the public hearing open in that case, Stacy, or do I close it? I think I'll leave it open.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll leave it open. So, motion's been made to continue this until June the 15th, and was it seconded?
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Terry?
Aye.
Councilmember Budge?
Yes.
Councilmember McGarvey?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gatewood?
Yes.
Mayor Sander?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to public hearing items. If the clerk would read item 11.1.
11.1, ordinance amending sections of the Rancho Cordova Municipal Code related to Title VI, Health and Sanitation, Title 16, Buildings and Construction, and Title 23, Zoning Code.
Okay, can we get I'm gonna open the public hearing. Could we get a staff report on this item?
Mr. Mayor, David,
Yes.
we heard this a lot. We made a staff report. It is
I think it should be very brief,
okay.
unless there are questions.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, Darcy Gillard with the Planning Department. I do have a very brief presentation if you'd like to hear it.
Go on ahead.
Next slide. Stephanie, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is just the introduction of the different sections that we're amending. So for Title VI, we're amending the definition of inoperative to add additional language to address current registration requirements with the DMV. Next slide. This is very similar to the slide you just saw. We're adding the same language to these various sections of the code to address current registration, and then adding a new number which would renumber some additional sections. Next slide, please. In terms of Title 23, this first change here is to remove an old reference to a limited use permit and change it to administrative use permit. Next slide, please. The addition to Title 23 for the overlay zoning district is to address additional uses that soil-borne farms would like to do on their site that have been planned for many years. And because we don't have a formal adoption of the American River Parkway Plan. We pulled out some details from that and put them in this section, which will facilitate future growth for soil-borne farms. Next slide, please. This section of the zoning code is being amended to add that very similar California DMV registration information into Title 23. Next slide, please.
And those are just aligning us with state law, right?
Those are aligning us with current information so that it's clear that the vehicles have to be also registered with the DMV and not just inoperable in the sense that they can't move.
Right.
The next amendment that we have for you is one that we discussed previously about extending the height of a retaining wall before it has to be stepped in due to different varying grade changes. Next slide, please. And this last section in terms of amendments is just cleaning up various sections of our home occupation regulations for the different sections that are on the code or on the screen for you in regards to the number of employees, correcting a reference number, how many deliveries can be sent to a house in a week, and clarifying prohibited businesses. Next slide, please. Staff's recommendation is to find the project exempt from CEQA and introduce and waive the first reading of the ordinance. I can answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I will move the staff recommendation.
Are there any speaking cards on the item?
There are not.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to close the public hearing. I think there is a motion. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Second by McGarvey. Motion by Budge, second by McGarvey. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Budge? Councilmember Budge?
Yes.
Councilmember Terry?
Aye.
Councilmember McGarvey?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gatewood?
Yes.
Mayor Sander?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to public hearing item 11.2. The city clerk would announce that subject, please.
Ordinance amending sections of the Rancho Cordova Municipal Code related to Title VI, Health and Sanitation, Title 16, Buildings and Construction, and Title 23, Zoning Code. I think I just read that twice.
All right. Open public hearing. Is there any staff report for this item?
Hang on a minute, we're on the wrong, Stacy just read in the wrong.
Oh, did you? Read in the previous one? Actually, this and 11.1 are,
The same.
My agenda says community development block grants.
it's a repeat on the agenda. Yeah, I'm sorry, we need item number 2.
Okay, what I have and what the mayor has is not what you have. Let me read what you have.
Correct.
Yeah, 11.2 is CDBG.
Thank you. Let me read the subject. Community Development Block Grant Program Amendments to the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan, 2020 Annual Action Plan, and Citizen Participation Plan for CDBG COVID funding.
Okay, do we need a staff report on this item? Yes?
I'm fine just moving it.
Any council member wish a staff report?
I will second Donald's item.
All right, I'm opening the public hearing. Any public comment?
No, there's not.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'm open to a motion. I'll close the public hearing.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Terry, second by, I think I heard McGarvey.
Yep.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Budge?
Yes.
Councilmember Terry?
Aye.
Councilmember McGarvey?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gatewood?
Yep.
Mayor Sander?
Aye. That brings us to regular calendar items and item 12.1. This is discussion and direction on potential high-end coffee establishment within the Folsom Boulevard specific plan. We have a staff discussion on this item.
Yes, good evening, Bertha Gart with the Planning Department again. As soon as the presentation comes up, I'll go ahead and start. Next slide, please. So the goal for tonight is have a discussion and receive some direction from council on a potential high-end coffee establishment within the Folsom Boulevard specific plan. Next slide, please. So actually, I believe it was just not long ago, just a few months ago, we had a discussion about our corridors themselves and high intensity and visibility and uses along the corridors. And we talked about some of these challenges with our infill sites, being that a lot of them have dual regulations over them, specific plans or special planning areas, and a lot of our sites are also located within our transit-oriented development nodes because they're within a quarter mile of our transit station. So those also have objectives and restrictions. And then there's additional layer of having to deal with the existing built environment and how this all intertwines and plays together. So what we found, just a quick refresher, and then we'll move on to the project itself, is it does pose a lot of challenges when we have these smaller infill pieces and how to meet all of these layers of regulations and also have a project that's viable at that specific location. Next slide, please. So the potential project that we're going to see on the next few slides would be a high-volume coffee user with a drive-through. It will have a walk-up component and an outdoor seating area. And they're looking at it's about a 0.93 acre parcel that's located along Zinfandel in front of the grocery outlet. So we'll get to the site plan, you'll see that for the most part, the project complies with all of our standards. It would not be solely an auto-centric use. They will, like I said, have a walk-up and an outside component. And in terms of maybe not being able to meet 100% of the criteria of a TOD is, when we're talking about TOD, we're talking about a mixed-use component that has various maybe office, commercial, and residential uses. Next slide, please. So the council is probably familiar with this parcel in general. We're talking about the grocery outlet bargain market. You can see at the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and right in front of that has been created a 0.93 acre parcel. Next slide, please. So what we have is, this is not a project that has been submitted. It is a draft preliminary site plan, and this is of a potential Dutch Brothers coffee kiosk. Generally, they're no more than 900 square feet in size. This particular location is proposed, if they do decide to move forward with this and submit a project, would have 2 drive-up lanes. They do not have an order box. They have staff out there that takes orders to move cars through the queue very quickly. This particular version of the site plan shows a very large landscape buffer in between Zinfandel and the coffee kiosk. They have on-site circulation. Additionally, I just want to point out that we do recognize as staff that there are some additional things we need to work with on the applicant if they choose to submit a project for this particular site. So again, this is very preliminary, and we've gone through a few versions with them on what might work, but we do understand there probably are some challenges on and off-site with this location. Next slide, please. On the screen before you are some draft, preliminary elevations. Again, this is more of their newer prototype. They use varying materials such as steel siding, stucco, some stonework. Staff did go out probably 3.5, maybe 4 weeks ago to their new location on El Camino. This would mimic in terms of design and pretty much on-site layout. What we did witness out there is, while it does have a pretty good amount of cars that flow through there, they get them through very quickly, and we didn't see any conflicts. It didn't trail out onto the street. They did a really good job about getting the cars through there. Next slide, please. So just to kind of summarize, and we can go back into a site plan up, is that what staff is focused on tonight is just to provide some direction on, number one, this type of potential use here. If the council is open to considering this use in the future, once entitlements come through, are there any modifications that you see for a future submittal? We do have various representatives from Dutch Brothers on the line that could answer some questions if you had them. And we have staff here that can address some issues as well. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, so that's a staff report.
Can we go back to the site plan?
Go
Back to the site plan, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so, it would be nice if the wind, okay, however, do we have any ability, do our individual cursors have any ability to point to certain things? Our wiggling line, does it show up anywhere?
No, I think you're gonna have to verbally describe it.
Okay, so the square at the northeast corner, is that the trash enclosure, Darcy?
Yes, it's their trash enclosure, but they also provide a larger outdoor space to accommodate some additional storage that's fully screened in.
Okay, so is it designed so that the trash truck will be pointed head into the thing for an overhead lift?
You broke up a little bit, but I think what you were asking is it aligned so that the truck can get in and pull the dumpsters out, correct? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the door...
I don't need an answer, Nathan. When you're working with very small sites, and depending on whether your waste hauler is overhead lift or side lift, you always need to be careful to accommodate their needs. So that would be a question for when the site plan gets finalized.
Darcy, the dotted area that surrounds the building and fronts Zinfandel and fronts the interior route to Target. That it looks like a dotted area on this image. Can you describe what that is?
That's their large landscape buffer.
Oh, wow.
So the challenge at the site is what you mentioned on one of your slides, and this is a transit-oriented development area. So my question is, how would you score this for transit-oriented development? You could have some pedestrian, customers here in addition to auto customers, but clearly this is designed primarily for auto customers. So I'm wondering, did you have any design considerations or discussions with them about how they could be more welcome in a transit-oriented area as opposed to being auto-centric?
Yeah, so what we did discuss, it's hard to see on the exhibit, but there is a space in between the landscape corridor and the building. It's a large outdoor patio area, a seating area, so they do have the ability to have, walk up and people actually not just walk up and get their coffee and go. They could actually sit there at some point they'll be able to hopefully sit there when this is over at tables and, have a conversation or, potentially maybe, grab some food at another nearby one and a coffee and sit there So in terms of how it scored, I think it goes back to it's a difficult site as an infill site that's also layered with this TOD. If we looked at it and said, is this good for residential, in order to hit a density that's going to satisfy the TOD standards, we're looking at multiple stories at a pretty dense product. And you're probably looking at parking underneath and maybe 4 to 5 stories to try to incorporate a residential component.
Right.
It's a challenging property in general, and I think that's the conversations we're starting to have internally is how we take these smaller infill pieces that have this TOD overlay and try to meet the balance of the two. So as staff, we did work with them over various layouts to get that walk-up window and outdoor seating component to not be so auto-centric focused.
Well, a healthy project here, and I don't know, Donald, you may have some insights on this, but a healthy project here would probably encompass the grocery outlet location as well as this, parking area in order to get sort of a critical mass for a good transitory development project. So I'm not sure looking at this site just on its own in terms of transitory development is the mark.
Well, I know right now they have the entrance into the duct, whether it's something that's open that isn't there right now. Because right now the only way you can go into the grocery outlet is right at the grocery outlet itself and the outlet right off of Zinfandel. So opening it up there in the middle, it may help the traffic, and maybe it'll help the pedestrians too. I'm not sure.
Actually, David, in terms of comparing this particular location with other quad locations, we might look at the area of 65th Street between Highway 50 and Elk Avenue. That whole area is a quad.
Yeah.
They've just opened an extremely large apartment complex. I know you know that area well.
Yep.
They've just opened a very large apartment complex, and Regional Transit sold a chunk of their parking lot to somebody else who's going to build another apartment complex there. But there's such a thing as over-densification, and if you think about the traffic that exists currently, the pedestrian traffic that they've got because of the underpass to Sac State and people coming off of the train and the bus to get to Sac State. And you think about more traffic because there'll now be different people in there. It just makes you wonder what's the limit where density is not productive? And since we already have a traffic problem in this stretch of Zinfandel between Folsom and Highway 50, taught or not, it may be more logical to go with something that makes sense and doesn't overwhelm area than to try to stick with pure Todd.
Other comments?
Well, I think there's some compounding things to think about here. I think the first would be the Walgreens is closing, I believe, this month.
It is.
Yeah. So we're about to have another vacant building across the street that's next to a vacant lot that seemed ripe for redevelopment of some sort, although sadly, considering that building's only, 12, 15 years old. To me, I think we're running into the same thing we're running into with the Quick Clack conversation. Is do we want heavy vehicle use on that corner? And 4 of us felt very strongly that we didn't want to add more traffic in that corridor and in that intersection. So, I like coffee. I like this company. We've approved these in other places. But, this, at some point, the idea is that the Folsom Triangle area is, really what our downtown is. It's where most people are going to shop, where most people are going to go and eat something. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm reluctant to support this in the manner that it's in right now. It is a great spot to densify with housing at some point. So I don't know. I'm reluctant, but I'm still open to the discussion. But yeah, I think the potential for something else there someday is great. And the more we build it, and plan it out now, the less options we have in the future.
It is a very challenging traffic location today. As someone who regularly tries to make a right leaving Target along the south end or the bottom end of this exhibit, you can wait quite a while in order to be able to make that turn. And in this case, it would best be afforded a right in and right out only sort of access at these 2 points. Bob or Garrett?
I think putting that location would create such an awful traffic jam, and I just don't think that's a good place to have that. I love the coffee, but that is not a good place. And since I'm one of the 4, I'm the only one that voted to put the quick class car wash in. I don't know how we're going to put something that's even more traffic driven into that location. I think that's prime. I think Donald's right. It's prime for our housing and stuff like that in that area / coffee. I just don't think it's right for coffee place or that coffee place.
I would put it this way: I would be all for a coffee shop at the bottom of a 10-story multifamily development. So it's not.
Anything you want to add on this, Bob?
No, I think it would be. Actually, I think it might be a good use of having another parking lot huge and not being used.
Okay, I see Micah is on the call here. Micah, can you unmute yourself? Micah, you're our Director of Economic Development, among other jobs. Did you talk to these applicants about other locations other than this that might not be quite as transit-oriented in their intention?
So I think we've had ongoing conversations with Dutch Brothers in all the different locations at various spots in the city. Obviously, this has become a site that they seem to be the most interested in and the most proactive in pursuing based on their own criteria. So I think we consistently work with them on finding other sites, but obviously they've asked us to bring it to you for discussion based on their interest and based on kind of the previous conversations we've had about TOD development, the different opportunities. This is a tough site. It's in a built environment, so you have existing stores, existing development that probably isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so we're kind of in this weird spot of trying to densify and provide additional opportunities in an area, but also understanding that it would be great if we had a 10-story residential unit with ground floor retail, but it will take a much larger piece of property and much larger property than this to actually do that.
How many drive-ins do we have on this side of Zinfandel between here and Olson? Is it 4?
4.
Yep.
About to be 5 if you count the Starbucks going in at around the corner on Zinfandel. On Olson.
Where?
Starbucks is going in across the street from Chevron behind Taco Bell.
Isn't there one On the other side on Olson next to the
They've
UPS store?
relocating.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Man, yeah, two of them that close to each other.
At least I assume that's still a live project, Darcy.
To our knowledge, it's still a live project, yes.
I thought.
Okay, is there an applicant on the phone who'd like to say something? If we can accomplish that? Maybe. Maybe not.
Darcy, who is the applicant? And are they on the phone?
There were a few, we're pulling up the names right now.
We'll probably need a phone number to find them.
It looks like somebody's raising their hand. I don't know if that's them.
Somebody named
Yeah.
Dustin.
Russ Orsi would be one.
Somebody named Dustin has their hand up.
And Dustin is one of them, Russ, Kelly.
I think they've been promoted. I see Dustin is here.
I see Russ too.
I see Russ is here. Okay, Dustin, Russ, can you hear us? Can't hear them. I see Russ, you're unmuted now. Can we hear you? Or Dustin?
I have a nice picture of Kelly.
Yeah, we have a picture of Kelly. Kelly, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you
Oh,
hear
and we can hear you. Wow. Well, then I think you're it.
I'm it, huh? Well, I mean, I guess I would say we have looked at a number of locations in this market. This one definitely. Uh-oh.
You can turn on your computer.
Okay.
Turn the mic
Is
on.
that better?
Turn the speaker. Perfect.
That's good.
Yep.
Okay. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But I am the real estate manager for the area, and as far as a site and what we look for when it comes to Dutch Bros criteria, this checks all the boxes for us. Of course, it has a really good synergy with the surrounding retail. It does have good traffic, foot traffic, as well as automobile traffic. And, you know, its proximity to the high school is a big deal for us. It's about a mile away, as well as middle schools. We like to get involved when it comes to younger kids and the youth in the area and trying to support their programs. So it's a good location for us in that regard. It also has good surrounding retail, not retail, residential. So it kind of checks all the boxes for us. Industrial is not too far away for those folks that are headed into work. So, of course, we would try to accommodate as much of a pedestrian-friendly concept that we could bring to the area, and we've done that in other areas in Sacramento. So all of your comments are things we've heard before.
What's your mix of use that you'd anticipate here, walk-up versus drive-through? Any idea about that?
I don't know for sure. I'm thinking it would probably a little bit higher end on the walk-up than we see in other areas because of its proximity to the transit station. Typically, we see about 80-20, so I'm thinking it might be around 70-30 here. But that's a tough one to answer.
Yeah, I recognize that. That's a tough one. Have you placed one of these in a transit-oriented position before, somewhere in our region or elsewhere?
I'm not certain about that. I wish Dustin could speak up because he would probably know.
Do we have Russ or Dustin?
Yes, Russ is here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yep.
I apologize. I apologize. I was talking earlier.
All right, go right ahead. Is there something you'd like to add to the discussion?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. Can you repeat it?
Is there something you'd like to add to the discussion? Specifically, we were talking about what's it like to have a Dutch Brothers in a transit-oriented development. Have you done anything like that before? And what's sort of the mix, walk-up versus drive-up?
So we have a we have a fair mix. We have a project similar to this that's going to take place off of Stockton Boulevard in Sacramento, where we've created an outdoor patio area fully covered with outdoor tables, seating, and benches. As far as the ratio mix between drive-up and walk-up, I want to say it's about 70-30. So 70% drive-through and 30% walk-up.
Could we get some information about where on Stockton Boulevard so we could go look at it?
It's not constructed yet.
Oh, okay.
We are in permitting. I believe Darcy made reference to our El Camino site.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think Kelly covered most of it.
All right. I still have Dustin here on my screen. Dustin, you were raising your hand before, so I know you're live. No, Dustin?
Hey, David, can we just sort of remind any of the speakers that are just been added, that if you're on your phone and on the computer, you got to turn off your mic and your speaker on your computer if you're going to talk on your phone, or it'll reverberate like that and repeat.
All right.
Where on El Camino? El Camino's very long. Where on El Camino?
At the corner of Eastern and El Camino, right across from the high school.
Okay. Right by the high school.
You know it.
I bet those are happy kids.
So this site is a bit of a long walk from the high school.
It is.
Not a normal post-school path that you would see students on. You see a lot more sort of at the intersection of Coloma and Folsom, to the west of this site, if that was a significant driver of business.
You know who does walk through there, David, is the kids from Kinney.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yes, maybe 5 to 10% of the student volume of Cordova, but yeah, Kinney kids would be in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
I guess my feedback on this would be this. You know, I think Zinfandel, we're still holding out hope that we can make that somewhat pedestrian friendly. I think Sunrise and Folsom is out the window. It's never going to be there. There's really no hope for how big it is, how much traffic is going through there, to do that. And so I think this is like, the Walgreens closing could be an opportunity. I mean, it's sad that it's closing, but it's an opportunity as well. Just like Aerojet closing, we lost a lot of jobs, but there's an opportunity there. I look at this site, and to Harry's point, the fairness doctrine of the fact that we didn't let Quick Quack go in 500 feet across the street, and then we're entertaining something that is so car heavy. If this was being brought to Coloma and Folsom, I'd evaluate it in a completely different way. Now, there's a Starbucks in that shopping center, but if there were other ones near there that they were looking at, sure. But I get why this is better than over there, because the car traffic is so much stronger right here. But I think this is the number one place, in my opinion, within our city that we want to get cars off the road as much as possible, and turn this as much as we can into a pedestrian-friendly environment. And it's really the only place, well, not the only, but it's our best chance where we have all of these services and retail that finally people can go back to. And, you know, as much as I love this company, and you guys operate a wonderful company that whenever there's a local tragedy or one of our officers was killed, and they raised a ton of money for the family. So I think the world of this company, it's just that intersection is just very special in my heart as far as what we could possibly do with it.
Yeah, I think no question. This is a sought after use. I mean, our residents, a good chunk of them would love to have this here. It would probably cost me a lot of money having this here. Is my guess based on people riding in my car on a regular basis. Who would want to go here? But if you look up and down our boulevard and where are the sites most likely to densify, Mason Field Road and Folsom Boulevard, clearly we're already there doing that to some level. And I would have to put this as second, because we've got some built-in commercial on Chase, the Target Center, and across Zinfandel from this location is not the healthiest retail in the world. And you can imagine a big site like that, or this entire grocery outlet site flipping to some dense residential use. And the advantage of that would be people who live there would have a place to walk from existing businesses in the area. So there's that added attraction, sort of like we saw in Capitol Village. I remember the apartment developers there talking about what a benefit it was to have something to walk to in the apartment instead of just having a place where you park your car. And that's what you need in transit development. You've got to have a densification along the corridor so that you build up your own little ecosystem at these sites. So the only way I could see this working in this side is somehow if it's extremely transit supportive and very focused on walk-ups, or it's done in conjunction with another more transit-focused or dense project. That'd be really.
Not to mention, I would say that for the past 3 or 4 years, Grocery Outlet has said that they were leaving, including saying that they were going to take over the older house on not Old Placerville, on there is Old Placerville.
Rancho, yeah.
Rancho and Old Placerville. So that there's been threats that that's going to be a vacant building for years to us. So, and again, I know the owners can't speak to that, and that's fine. But yeah, as the former chair of the Air District, I can't look at this project and say we want a vehicle-heavy use that close to a light rail. Stop. But I want this business in town. I mean, find another place that's not right there, and let's talk. And I voted Scooters was on Sunrise. They moved it even interior to the shopping center, and it works. It's fine. But we're never gonna get the vehicle traffic down on Sunrise. There's just a chance. There's a chance in this area.
I agree with you there. Linda, Garrett, Bob, any other comments?
Well, seriously, I know it seems a little contradictory, but I'd be inclined to support it. And I know, I do understand the points that you all are making about densification. Again, I caution about over-densification, over-stressing a road system change.
I was talking and they couldn't even hear me.
There's a huge amount of pedestrian traffic in that area over from Olson to Folsom Boulevard, up Zinfandel, both directions on Folsom Boulevard. There's a huge amount of pedestrian traffic, to the west on Folsom Boulevard. So to the extent that they can take advantage of that, the foot traffic is there. It would be, with that wonderful landscaping, it would be the best thing that's happened to that corner since we took down that 4-section billboard some 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was a big improvement.
That was a big one. strikes me as more likely that we could put, say, and I get the 10 stories, Donald, but it's more like we could put 5 stories with a ground floor use on the old Cordova Lodge site. So scrape the Walgreens, because it's not ever going to be structurally suitable to build anything on top of it. And they've got 3 parcels next to them before you get to the Silly Smog Shop. And that's where you would find residential up against the residential. It is unlikely that somebody's going to come over here across the street and put in a 5-story building next to the shopping center and the light rail. It looks like it almost looks like a hotel site. If you're thinking multi-story, like 3-story hotel, to me it doesn't feel a place to live.
So that's a very interesting comment, Linda. I wonder if there's a way we could get some outside input on that point. You know, how likely is this site? How suitable is it for residential? Is there someone who could sort of say, yeah, that could work, or no way, it's not a good residential site?
Keep in mind, we've had people say, go ahead.
You're probably going to get 2 different stories. You're going to get 1 story from a broker, and you're going to get 1 story from the planning department at Portland State. That's really 2 opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right. Just like the idea of housing or dorms in the business park, right? There's people that say you just can't do that. We need all of this parking and everything. Yet now, the number of employees you can have in that same space is completely different.
Yeah.
Now with Corona and everything else, right? So these arguments of we have to plan for parking for this and that. A lot of these things don't make the same sense that they used to. So, and Linda, and I get your point, and I was just, 10 stories would be great, but yeah, if it's 2 or 3 or whatever, but I think when we look at these pinch points of getting in and out of the city, one, that intersection is already a nightmare. It's screaming for the bridge that they have down at Sunrise. But that just breeds more of people not getting out of their cars and, going into these shopping areas. As much as this, go ahead.
If Cyrus is ever able to build an overpass at Zinfandel, it will screen the 5-story building that they're going to build on the northeast side, where the Walgreens and the Cordova Lodge were.
Yeah, and again, all of those corners are critical. I just don't know if I could go and support something that is so vehicle heavy in its use, and I think that the proposer from bringing us something that has a lot of outdoor seating that you don't see at Scooters and some of the other ones that are in the area. That again, and if I was voting against Quick Quack, I can't vote for this. Even at the spot.
I think I've tallied up a no from Garrett and a yes from McGarvey, a maybe from Linda, and a probable no from Terry. Is that right? Did I misrepresent anybody?
Oh, ultimately, David, I'm going to be a yes.
You're going to be a yes?
Yes.
And I'm leaning towards no with this site. Garrett, did I represent you properly?
This is Nick with Barkhausen. If I can say a few words, I was able to unmute myself.
Yep. Who is that?
This is Nick Wecker with Barkhausen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I just want to reiterate. So I'm with Barkhausen. I'm a senior planner. I'm a civil engineering consultant for Dutch Road. And I just want to reiterate that we haven't made a formal application yet for what would be a conditional use permit as required on this property, since it is zoned C and U. Drive-through uses require a conditional use permit. So this would go to council for approval. I want to reiterate with regards to the beginning of the presentation that we're here to get feedback on the site plan, anything we can do to help garner support. We do, this is an attractive location for Dutch Bros, mainly there. Coffee users like this, and similar to fast food and gas stations, they rely on traffic industry-oriented type uses. And so that's what makes this site attractive. It's not generally use that's generating a lot of net new trips to the area. It's capturing the trips that are already there. In addition, Dutch Bros is realizing, they want to capture the potential for the pedestrian traffic as well. And so we looked at several different site layouts for this property, for on this grocery outlet parking lot. A lot of our initial innovations are, Dutch Bros being set back quite a ways from the street. But we're realizing there's opportunity there to capture a lot of the pedestrian traffic, not just today, but in the future with the light rail station improvements and other items we're seeing that pedestrian, more pedestrian traffic as years go by. And so, we want to develop a good patio space that faces the street, have some weather protection, have some additional pedestrian amenities to make it a welcoming environment for pedestrians to come in and have their own window to order coffee. Catching the box and getting light rail. So that's kind of our intention with this. And like I said, we're still early in the process. And I appreciate the talk to be able to get some feedback and see opportunities for how we can improve on our site plan. I understand you're just looking at the plan view too. I think the renderings would help and maybe some additional information on traffic and in this area may help as well with our application. We have a whole bunch of landscape area along the street, as you can point out as well, that we can do some additional things in terms of pedestrian amenities and plazas and grass. So we're completely open. It's an attractive site for our client that's excited and wants to see something happen. Like Linda pointed out, it's an existing parking lot today, so it's improvement in that, improvement to the existing site, and that we're adding something, we're converting parking spaces into something that people can use.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anyone else have any inputs? Otherwise, Darcy, you were looking for some direction here. What do you think you got?
I think I have clear direction. What I heard was 3 no's and 2 yeses.
Mine's less of a no and more of a somewhere else.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I hope that comes across that way. Just not here is my.
Yeah, I'm very pro Dutch Bros. Just this site is tough.
We got a community college campus, down the street on Folsom Boulevard with a whole bunch of parking lots around that could use it. I think we own some land. We can talk about.
Yeah, we just tried a site down there, and nothing ever happened. So if you can help, we're open.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Donald. This is Amanda, Economic Development Manager here for the city. And so what Kelly just stated, we have searched for many locations here in Rancho Cordova. Dutch Bros has been a great partner with us. This is why this location was the one location that we were able to find for them currently.
Okay. I hear it.
And I should also say that this would be they're no longer franchising, so all Dutch Bros are corporate entities, so it's run by the corporate.
That's good to know.
That's good.
Yeah, I wish I could vote yes for this. I really want to. I just can't. Not there.
Okay, thank you. I think we have the direction we needed. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all. That was item 12.1. We're going to move on to 12.2, which I think is a rapid item. 12.2 is direction on local early action plan, or LEAP, grant application for accelerating housing production. And we have a staff report for this one.
I would be happy to move the staff recommendation and approve the resolution authorizing.
All right. Is there any objection to that? Do we have any public comment on this item, Stacy?
We do not.
Okay, this is item 12.2. Linda suggested we skip the staff report because it's pretty self-explanatory. Colleagues, anybody want to comment on this or get a staff report? Okay, I'm open,
Wonderful idea.
open to a motion. Go ahead, Linda.
Yes, I move I will move the staff recommendation that we approve and authorize the application for and receipt of the lease grant program funds.
Okay, motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard a second from McGarvey.
Yes.
All right, motion made and seconded. If there's no further discussion, can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Budge,
Yes.
Councilmember Terry,
Aye.
Councilmember McGarvey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gatewood,
Yes.
Mayor Sander.
Aye.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 12.3, which is draft guidelines for SB 743 implementation, which I think is right around the corner. And we've got to talk vehicle miles traveled and new analysis goals. So, staff comments, staff report? Is that you, Albert?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor Sander and council members. Albert Stricker with the Public Works Department. And the state of California has mandated through Senate Bill SB 743 that when traffic analyses are performed for CEQA, that they change their focus from level of service and delay to vehicle miles traveled. And John Long is our consultant assisting city staff with this, and he's going to provide further information to the city council on what that means and what that means for the city of Rancho, Cordova, our businesses and community.
And this is by July 1st. We need to make this change, right, Albert?
That is correct. We do have the ability, if we don't make that change, what it would mean is that we would have to make determinations on a case-by-case basis, which could certainly prolong any CEQA analyses.
Yeah.
And if John is on the line, I'll hand it over to you, John.
John, go ahead. I hope you have a brief presentation for us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I have a number of slides. I will strive to get through them as quick as I can. We've been working with a team of consultants and city staff over the last few months to come up with these requirements. And the objective is to develop and adopt new city guidelines for evaluating transportation impacts under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. And yes, you have to do that by July 1st, and all of the jurisdictions in the state are going to have to do that. So we will be requesting that the city council take action, which is adopt some new city policies to implement SB 743. Today, we're presenting some information and outlining proposed policies for your consideration. Staff will be coming back on June 15th to meet and request that you adopt those policies. Next slide, please. SB 743 changes the basis for how CEQA impacts are identified. Today, transportation impacts are identified based on level of service, which really means the amount of traffic delay that's caused by a project. Starting July 1st, transportation impacts of a project under CEQA will be identified based on their vehicle miles of travel. The city can continue to require land development projects evaluate the operations of the roadway system serving their project to meet the city's level of service policy, general plan level of service policy. But the city can continue to use level of service to plan its roadway system. However, after July 1st, level of service can no longer be used for a CEQA transportation impact. Next slide, please.
John?
Yes.
I have a sneaky feeling you might want to explain level of service.
Okay, I can do that. Level of service. I can give you the quick one. Level of service is a measure that's been used for decades, and it generally involves the amount of delay that traffic has on the roadway system. For the city, it's primarily dictated by the level of service of your major intersections, because they create the biggest delay issues. So it's usually more related to delay that occurs at major intersections. And so you have grades of A through F. Level service F is heavily congested. The city has a level service D policy that anything E or F is unacceptable. So, as we just mentioned, that currently the city has this policy for acceptable level service in your general plan. The policy can be maintained, but what we'll be asking is for adoption of new policies to define your acceptable levels of VMT. The specific measures the state wants you to use to measure VMT is VMT per capita and VMT per employee. And so the policies will be acceptable levels for those measures. And I'll explain that in a minute here. Next slide, please. So first, we'd like to give you an idea of where the city stands on these two VMT metrics. The primary tool the city uses is SACOG's Regional Travel Demand Model. We use that along with SACOG's 2016 and 2040 development forecast to both measure the regional averages and the city averages for VMT per capita and VMT per employee. This chart shows how the city's averages compare to the regional average and how these VMT metrics are projected to change between 2016 and 2040. Today, the city's average for VMT per capita is well below the regional average. This is primarily because the city is a regional employment center, and your population has a lot of jobs and a lot of retail located close by for your city residents. But by 2040, this will increase, but the VMT per capita is projected to remain about the same as it is today, which is below the regional average. On the other hand, the city's average for VMT per employee is well above the regional average. This is also due to the city being a regional employment center. You have a high jobs per housing ratio, thus you import a lot of workers to the city. Some of those people commuting to the city have longer trips, which causes a higher VMT per employee than the regional average. But the good news is that the city's average for VMT per employee is projected to decrease substantially by 2040. And the reason for this decrease is that the housing in the city is projected to grow at a faster rate than jobs over the next 20 years. So over time, you will import a lower percentage of workers, and thus the city average VMT per employee will decrease. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
Those estimates. Wouldn't the current economic and crisis that we're running into, and the number of people that are now remoting almost fully from home, and the number of companies that are encouraging, if not just flat out telling their employees to not come back to work, and that they can just work from home indefinitely, how has that been incorporated into that estimate?
It has not yet. These are based upon, the information that was generated for the latest Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Sustainable Community Strategy by SACOG. And of course, that was done and adopted, in last fall. And so it'll take some time for, I think, people to sort out what's going on right now. Right now, everything you see is based upon pre-COVID-19 conditions.
Yeah, I would go further as to say that the numbers that you showed us are almost meaningless as of today and for probably the next 10 years.
I think you're right, Donald, but the state hasn't discovered that yet.
Yeah.
I do think that everybody's going to be trying to figure that out very quickly, but it is going to take a while. Okay, so next chart that's on here shows the steps that you go through in the analysis process. After an applicant provides a project description, there is a screening process. And that's a key step, since many projects can be screened out from requirements to do a VMT analysis. If a project is not screened out, a VMT analysis will be conducted, and this will be compared to thresholds of significance, which is a CEQA term, and that's the action that the staff will be asking the council to do on June 15th, is to adopt policies to establish those thresholds. So let me describe these steps. Starting with the screening process, that's the projects that do not have to be conducted, do not have to conduct VMT analysis. Next slide, please. Now, there are projects that are exempt for non-VMT reasons. These are not new reasons. These are reasons that, you don't have to evaluate transportation impacts under current CEQA requirements. That's in cases where you have a decision, or the decision required for the project is not discretionary. The project is exempt for other reasons. And a key one is if the project already has been analyzed in a prior EIR, it will also be exempt. And that's important because you have a number of EIRs on a number of major specific plans. And as portions of those specific plan areas develop, they will not have to conduct a VMT analysis as long as development is consistent with the adopted specific plan. Next slide, please. So development projects can also be exempt from VMT analysis based on some key technical factors. The first set of factors are ones that are based upon the location of the project. That is, are they near transit or are they in a VMT efficiency area, which is an area where development today is below VMT thresholds of significance. There are other factors which we'll describe, which is the project a small project? Is the project local serving retail or local serving public uses, or is it an affordable housing project? And we'll discuss those factors. Next slide, please.
This is a funny conversation considering our last conversation.
Yeah. The first of these, the proximity to transit, is straightforward. The state says that if development within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop, if it's within that, it's assumed to be less than significant. Major transit stops are those where the frequency of bus or trains come to that stop at 15 minutes or less headways throughout the morning and afternoon commute periods. And both the light rail stations in the city and bus stops along the Cordova 177, the Villages route, are considered major transit stops under today's conditions. So the crosshatched areas on this slide are the areas that can be screened out due to their proximity to transit. Next slide, please. Now, this table summarizes the proposed thresholds of significance, which are used both in project screening process and the defined impacts. And this is the one that we will be asking for policy decisions by the council. The recommended residential threshold is 85% of the regional average vehicle miles of travel per capita, VMT per capita, which is the threshold recommended by the state. We propose, though, that the office and industrial developments be compared to the city average of VMT per employee instead of the regional average. And we propose that for two reasons. First, because the city today is a regional employment center, and second, because SACOG estimates that the city average for VMT per employee will decrease substantially over the next 20 years. The last land use category on the retail development, it's a different condition because new local serving retail can actually decrease VMT for both residents and employees. But for regional retail, the threshold of significance will be defined as, does adding the regional retail increase overall regional VMT?
Is there a specific criteria that defines regional retail?
We have in the guidelines a set of uses that would be considered to be specific to regional retail. And I'll get to that in a minute. We'll talk a little bit about some of the criteria that are going to be used for that, for local serving. So if you give me a minute or two here, I'll get to that specifically. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to show you a set of maps here that talk about areas that are screened out based upon their location. Now this map shows areas where new residential development can be screened out based on the combined effects of proximity to transit and low VMT areas. So the area within the red lines there can be screened out. The entire infill area of the city has low VMT per capita, and other areas near existing and planned light rail stations along Folsom Boulevard would also be screened out. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
On that slide? I'm really surprised. I mean, I get, so you're saying if there's residential development within those red areas, that it would be considered low VMT areas. But if somebody that's living in Elk Grove or El Dorado Hills or Roseville that's commuting here moves into the south area of Rancho and goes from an hour commute to a 7-minute commute, why wouldn't that benefit as well?
Good question, but the way the guidelines from the state are laid out, that they're looking at the VMT specific to the development and the location that's being proposed.
But a huge swath of what's not included within the red area is going to be commercial and industrial development that would put the residential development within like a mile or two of it.
You're saying within the eastern area, the growth area of the city, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, so if you're going down to where Douglas is,
yes,
just north of that, all the way up to that black line, it's going to be like 2/3 residential and 1/3 of it's going to be industrial and commercial.
Right.
So why wouldn't that be considered lowering VMT? Because most of those people that are going to work there or that are working in the business park now, last estimates were 80% of them were commuting into the city from outside city. So if they moved into a residential home within a mile or so, why not?
Well, the target is a pretty challenging bar because it's 85% below the average, 85% of the average. So it's a challenging bar. And I guess we're going to talk a little bit about your growth area. That, as I mentioned just briefly before, that your existing specific plans, which is, Sun Ridge, Sun Creek, Rio de Oro, they have adopted or certified environmental documents. So as long as development stays within, those specific plans, they do not have to do new VMT analysis or have new VMT impacts.
That's really critical, John, because the only thing of significance is the extreme south, Major Ranch, and then above White Rock, Westboro. But yeah, Donald has an excellent point, because we started off from day one with a pledge that we would make sure that there were places to work and shop east of Sunrise, because we didn't want to build we didn't want to build in a cross-town traffic jam. If people only lived east of Sunrise and had to get up and drive west of Sunrise every day, we would simply have our own internal traffic jam, and we didn't want to do that.
Well, I think we're going to get to a couple of additional factors that are be helpful to this. Again, this is the screening maps. This doesn't mean that those areas clearly will have VMT impacts. It just means that they won't be initially screened out unless they already have a certified environmental document on a specific plan or other EIRs. So let me go next to the office development, the slide you see there. This map shows areas where office development would be screened out, again, by the combination of proximity to transit or low VMT areas. Most, but not all, of the infill area would be screened out, plus areas along existing and planned, the ones that are near light rail stations along Folsom Boulevard would be screened out. Next slide, please.
No, never mind. The curious thing is, yeah, no, that's fine, never mind.
Okay, so this is the final map, and it shows industrial development that would be screened out. Again, it's very similar to the other ones. Basically, the infill area would be screened out, plus other areas along Folsom Boulevard near the light rail station. So, next slide, please. Yes, the other screening criteria. This table lists some additional screening criteria that are not related to the location of the development. Small projects are those that generate less than 237 daily trips, which seems like an odd number, but it comes from a technical issue in CEQA about projects that can be exempted, and SACOG used local data to come up with the 237 daily trips. But back to the issues of local serving retail, hopefully this answers the question about the criteria for that. The state recognizes that local serving retail, both retail and public facilities, help reduce VMT from residential as well as office uses. So a neighborhood shopping center up to 125 square feet are good for VMT. But we also recognize that in the city's growth area, the area east of Sunrise, is underserved by retail development today and will likely to continue to be so for some time. To help minimize VMT from your new residential area, retail should be strongly encouraged in the growth area. Thus, we can justify a higher, which is up to 200,000 square foot retail center, for local serving retail in the growth area. So public facilities are primarily local serving, but the guidelines will list some regional public serving facilities that will need to have some level of VMT analysis. And finally, the state recognized that affordable housing has lower VMT than market rate housing and allows exemptions from VMT impacts. Next slide, please. Let me talk a little bit about mitigation. Now, if the development of a project has a significant impact, there are a wide range of mitigation measures that can reduce VMT. They generally fall into the categories listed here. First, you can change the project. Either it's land use mixes or it's site changes, but we recognize this is challenging since developers may not want to make significant changes to their projects. You can also do site enhancements. An example of that would be adding a connection from your site to surrounding bike trails and lanes. But the most common or most typical mitigation measures for reducing VMT is travel demand management. There's a wide range of those. There's a lot of examples. I mean, they could be adding bike lockers. They could be providing subsidies for transit passes. There could be a lot of them. Now, the final measure that's on here, it falls into the general category of fee programs. These type of programs can be challenged to establish, but the city already has a program called the Transit-Related Services Special Tax. This existing city program has been used to fund Cordova and transit shuttles, and it can also be used to fund other services that reduce vehicle trips. The city has already implemented this program in 28 areas to date, and we see this as a very promising VMT mitigation measure that can be used, and especially in the growth area. Next slide, please. Now, all the prior slides I've been talking about VMT impacts of development projects with guidelines. The guidelines also need to address VMT impacts of transportation projects. There are many types of transportation projects that will be exempt from VMT analysis. They include new and enhanced transit, bike, and pedestrian facilities, roadway maintenance and rehabilitation, safety improvements, intersection and traffic operations improvements. But also, an important thing is that roadway projects that have been evaluated in EIRs for your general plan and your specific plans will be exempt as long as they are the roadway projects stay consistent with those plans. So, next slide. So the transportation projects thresholds of significance are as follows. If a roadway project is not in a general plan or an adopted specific plan, and it increases total VMT, then it has a significant impact. Or if there's a significant change in a roadway project in a general plan or adopted specific plan, and it significantly increases total VMT, it would have an impact. So the next slide, please. So the next steps are a continuing outreach to the development community, finalizing the transportation impact guidelines, which we will be releasing a version this week after we hear comment tonight, and the council action on adoption policies, specifically the thresholds of significance for CEQA VMT impacts. So that's our presentation. I guess we're ready to answer any questions.
John, actually, I really appreciate your explaining all this. I went into this being confused on how in the world we could actually measure VMT. I think ITE or somebody actually has like VMT for residential that are typically referred to, but the whole thing seemed kind of confusing, and you really clarified it.
That was a good summary of the situation. So, John, you said there was some decisions to be made by us or some recommendations to be made by us. Can you outline what those options are?
Well, the primary thing, and that will be brought back to you on June 15th, is the thresholds of significance. That we and staff are making a recommendation for that are in the PowerPoint that you have a copy of, and thresholds of significance are things that are discretionary, that each lead agency in a CEQA context makes a determination of what their threshold should be. They're recommendations by the state, but every city and county has to adopt their own. And we're doing a balancing act here of trying to have defensible thresholds of significance, but within the context of the city being a major employment center, that we're crafting the thresholds of significance in a way that can help you.
So the state, I'm scanning back to the slide. So the state was suggesting, the recommended threshold here was 85% of the regional average.
Right. It's a couple slides before the one that's on the screen right now. There, that one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's those are the primary thing. We want any comments you have on any other screening criteria, but I think that the primary thing that we are asking for a policy decision on June 15th will be these recommended thresholds.
Okay. Are there questions, Council?
Could we Is there any ability to do some kind of real-time examples on residential or office?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I think that, we would quickly, start out with a variety of residential and office and other projects that, just by their location, they're in the infill area, they're in good shape. There are some fringes of the infill area that office projects might have a little bit of a challenge on, but I think that your residential, office, and industrial in your infill area is primarily screened out. It's really more about things that are further east. But I think that one of the key things that we want to point out is that one of the reasons you get to screen out a bunch of things is because you have 15-minute frequency of bus service, say for Cordova and 177. Because you are requiring or working with developers to have that same special tax for transit in other areas, you'll be collecting more and more funds that builds itself up over time. You will be able to have 15-minute headways on other transit routes, and that will start to screen out other areas of the city. I think it's a very promising measure you already have that can allow you to screen out other portions of the city.
So if I had to I'm not sure extrapolate's the right word, but if I had to kind of project that going forward. So if we think about the large swath, as Donald pointed out, if we think about the large swath of office industrial that goes up at a diagonal through Rio de Oro because it mirrors the approach pattern for Mather.
Yes.
So if they were able to attract a large industrial user with a lot of employees, then really the best fallback position, and completely putting aside the fact that we think that there seems to be a significant indication that workspaces of the future are going to be different. But if they were to attract a large industrial user with a lot of employees, the most logical fallback position would be to impose the transit tax on them, which of course we would do anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, and because if you're talking about development specifically in Rio de Oro, it's adopted certified environmental adopted plan.
Right.
It's whether you're talking about, say, Westboro or other areas that don't have, to the south, that don't have adopted specific plans, that they'll have to go through a process.
So where in these four categories do things like universities and hospitals fall?
Good question. Universities are regional uses, so they will have to be evaluated for VMT impacts. They won't be screened out. That's a regional public facility or private facility. So it would need to go through a VMT analysis. You mentioned
hospital.
That's another. Well, hospitals.
Actually, the question has to do more with thresholds of significance, not whether or not it gets evaluated.
Okay. Well, the one of the things that will be in the guideline is that for every one of your land use categories, they have to be assigned to what the threshold is. So we have a table, which you'll see in the guidelines, that we're going to release this week, that shows that hospitals will be considered the equivalent, same kind of category as an office. That's what we're proposing. And
Okay, so while we're looking at only 4 major categories here, you've got a list somewhere that's much more expansive.
yes, it's
Okay.
it's a big table in the guidelines that maps the uses from the city's zoning code into that. We work with Darcy to map that out.
Okay.
All right. Very good. This is coming back to us on June the 15th, 2 weeks from today?
Correct.
I have a question. Are we getting any more information from staff? Or are we just, this is what we're going to have and we're just going to put it in as a, on the agenda and it'll just pass?
I think that there's going to be the guidelines that are going to be released this week as an attachment to what goes to the council. So I believe that I'm not quite sure. Albert, you may want to answer that question about when those might be in their hands, but that will have all the information. We were waiting to see if there was any direction from council today that would change the draft that we're going to release.
Thank you, John. I'm not seeing any, or nor do I have any to contribute at this point. Significant changes to this.
No.
Albert?
And I just wanted to reiterate what John was saying. When we return to council on June 15th, we will be bringing the guidelines back. We anticipate that based on this feedback from the city council, we will be able to release the guidelines to do some additional public outreach beginning this week. And at that same time, we will provide those more detailed guidelines for council review prior to the 15th.
Okay.
So David, my only question is, when can we update this report to have real numbers to rely on VMT? So we're going to submit this. I guess that we have to do this by the deadline. I'd be interested to know what happens if we don't do it by the deadline.
What's the update cycle?
Yeah,
what is
and then how?
alternative?
Okay, go ahead.
Alternative to not doing it. We could delay. It just puts our projects potentially at some risk. I don't know.
Well, I'd be interested to see what that is. My frustration right now is, I think VMT, like, I filled up my car with gas like 7 weeks ago, right? I used to do that twice a week. And so there's that. And there's a lot of people like me that have been doing that. And so we don't know what these numbers aren't grounded in reality. And the fact that we're looking at huge parts of, I mean, I guess I've been a huge proponent since I got on this council that we should be marketing to everyone that's driving an hour more away to get to our city every day to work, that they should live here. And I just looked at a map that 2/3 of our new residential development doesn't count. That seems ridiculous to me.
It's a huge irony.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we're looking, like, basically all of the green space, they say, no, that doesn't count. Yet we're going to put a massive amount of jobs there. And so if Sacramento builds downtown, that's great. But, like, if we build a suburban and an urban area next to our business park, basically if it's on the wrong side of Sunrise, it doesn't count. And if you don't access it by light rail, it doesn't count. Is what I just read.
Donald, it's just as bad as when Cat Village was going through its EIR process, and the Air District charged them $425,000 because they were going to do 2 kinds of pollution. They were going to pollute while they were under construction, number one, and number two, there was nothing in the SECOG model at the time that allowed for new urban development.
Right.
And so the 800 or 1,100, the 1,100 acres were going to generate more houses than normal, and so they got charged because there would be more cars and more pollution.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just logical.
The rules don't always work.
I would be interested in what the alternative is to waiting and what the danger would be to waiting. I'd like to hear that at the next meeting. And then I would be very interested how soon we can update these with a better study that's more based on today's environment and economy.
Well, let me add a couple things. First off, if you don't, by July 1st, if an applicant comes in, you still have to evaluate them with these new. You don't have adopted policies, you're going to have to do it on a case-by-case basis, and that could slow down your initial projects that come forward. But I think everybody, these are brand new requirements and brand new issues, and I think that everybody's recognizing that this is not static. In fact, we even say in the guidelines that this will be needed to be updated. It's just we don't know how long it will be before you do the next update. There's the technical reasons you're bringing up because of the new conditions that no one anticipated. There's going to probably be lawsuits over these issues somewhere in the state where people are going to sue a city or county because of whatever guidelines they have. And
can we sue the state over this? Can I sue?
I'm not able to answer that.
Well, I know. I got my lawyer on the phone.
But I'm just saying that everybody recognizes you're going to have to update these guidelines over time to reflect a variety of things. And I think the only the issue you're pointing out about the new travel behavior condition will probably take a while because everybody says, well, what's the new normal and what are we based on? When does things level out to something? And I don't know how long that's going to take.
Yeah. Agreed. I just think it's just unfortunate because it's kind of that argument of, when you have a spending cap for governments, right? There was this idea at the bottom of the economy, during the Great Recession, we should have spending caps so that we lock in when we have the lowest revenue we're ever going to have, and that's where we need to do it. And it's kind of the same idea here is.
We do have spending caps, Donald. They're part of Prop 13.
Well, no. That's spending by areas, not total caps. But anyway, my point was, when you look at this and you go, we're about to adopt something that says, we've got to limit vehicle miles traveled, and it's under a model that we're traveling probably 1/3 of what we were 3 months ago. And now we're going to take the numbers that were at the peak last year and say, here, this is the goal and this is what we have to rely on when, 80% of this country is either working from home or not working. Let's put it, in one way or another, or their transportation activities have drastically reduced. And we're going to say, here, now we're going to adopt a plan like that. Like, that's not the reality. It's just frustrating. So.
All right. Thank you, John. Obviously, we'll hear more about this, not just in 2 weeks, but probably in years to come.
Well.
All right, Albert, anything else on that matter, or did we wrap it well?
Nothing to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. That was item 12.3. Item 13 is council request for future agenda items. Seeing none, we are nearing adjournment.
David, I some of us got an email just a minute ago, and I just wanted to make a comment about journeying in memory. I'd like us to adjourn in the memory of George Floyd. A lot of people saw a video this week that horrified them. I know it horrified me. We had a difficult situation not too long ago in our city.
Yep.
And I just wanted to address that what I saw really disturbed me. I know it disturbed a lot of people in our city and our community, and a lot of people are very frustrated and very hurt. And they're expressing themselves in a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of people out there that genuinely are trying to protest and really, really are hurt by what they saw and what they've experienced in their life. And we should respect that, and I respect that. But that doesn't give anybody the right to loot or damage property while expressing their frustrations.
Yep.
And so I would like us to adjourn in the memory of George. There's a lot of people across this country that are doing that as well.
You practically took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, there's a very real issue that's facing our region and our community. And just as you said, this has touched Rancho Cordova in a way. I think we as a council have made it really clear that we stand with justice in cases like this. And I dare say we're united in our opposition to the use of violence. So what happened in Minneapolis, I agree with you, Donald. It's horrific. It's completely unacceptable. And what's happening now with looting and rioting, if you want to call it that, that's also unacceptable. I think the voice of protest is being lost in sort of this cacophony of the rioting and looting and the media frenzy about that. City of Sacramento is obviously deeply damaged by this. The physical damage estimates are in, excess of 10 million, I think, at this point. They've imposed a curfew. Cyrus and I talked about that today. We have that ability, but haven't really seen the need to do so here in Rancho Cordova. And I think, as a council, we should just urge all sides in this period to stand down on the rhetoric, stand down on the lawlessness, and encourage us to come together. As one people, we can reach the height of the American dream of equality and opportunity for all if we can just come together. Because together we're strong and divided we're weak, in this as in so many other things. So if you want to close with those sentiments and Donald's sentiments, I think that'd be great.
One thing I'd like to add to that, Martin Luther King had a speech in Stanford University, and he emphasized his support for nonviolent tactics in the struggle for freedom and justice. And then he expressed his disapproval for riots, referring to them as socially destructive. I think it's a better way of saying that than just that. Struggle for freedom and justice is what we're trying to do, but you don't need to burn everything down to try to get somebody's attention.
Yeah, I would also just acknowledge that, most of the people that are committing those crimes are not actually a part of mourning George's death or what happened to him, and they're really hijacking, people trying to express themselves, to congregate and to assemble peacefully to do exactly what you just said, Bob. And I know that our police force here in our city, we're not going to stand for those people hijacking the cause that these people are trying to fight for.
Right. Anybody else want to add a comment before we close? All right. Well, we started this meeting with a prayer for victims of the coronavirus. We're ending it with a plea for peace, basically, in our community, our region, our nation. So with those thoughts, we are adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.